Hello, and welcome to another episode of The U. My name's Mark Brereton. I'm an instructor at Cisco. When managing Cisco's Secure Firewall Threat Defense Firewall with the onboard Firewall Device Manager, it's possible to configure a pair of identical firewalls as a high availability pair, where at any one point in time, one of the devices is active and the other one is in standby mode. You nominate one of the devices as the primary and the other one as a secondary. Now that's the focus of this episode, and it's broken up into two parts. But before discussing what we're going to cover in this first part, let's first of all take a look at the topology for the demonstration which I'm going to be giving shortly. So in this environment, there are two networks. There's the inside network with an address of 133 on the left-hand side, with the host Attila connected to it. And on the right-hand side, there's another network, the DMZ, network 10, with the hosts Bledder and Lamp connected. Now, prior to configuring the failover pair, I have two firewalls up and running, but only one of those is configured, and that's one denoted in the diagram by FDM1. Okay, so that's got an address of 254 connected to the inside, the left-hand side, and 254 connected to the DMZ. Now, as you're going to see shortly, Attila will be able to communicate with Bledder and Lamp, and Bledder and Lamp can talk to Attila through the configured interfaces. But initially, FDM2 is unconfigured. Okay, so the interfaces are unconfigured there. And once we've determined that, what we'll then do is to log in to decide which device is going to be primary. In this case, it's going to be FDM1. Now, that's quite important because as we configure the HA pair, the failover pair, that the device which is the secondary, in this case FDM2, will have its config synchronized or overwritten by the primary. Okay? Now, one of the important things here is that when you set up a failover pair, you must have a dedicated link for synchronizing the traffic, and that's this failover link here, and you have to assign an IP address to that. Now, if you want to maintain state, so connections are maintained when you swap one device which was secondary becomes active to maintain connections, we also need state information. So although the failover and state links can be the same interface, in this demonstration, I'm going to have two separate interfaces for that. And that's, so the state link, I've assigned different IP addresses for that. Now, just to reiterate that when we talk about FDM, it has this underlying firewall threat defense, and the FDM is the localized manager which we've enabled. There is an alternative manager called the Firewall Management Center, but that's really not the focus of this demonstration. Okay, so although the HA pair isn't configured yet, as I do that, I'm going to nominate FDM1 where I've done the pre-configuration as a primary, FDM2 as a secondary. Okay, so let's see what we're going to do in the demo before going ahead with it. So this is part one of this high availability demo. In this first part, we're going to examine the pre-configuration setup to check how everything is before we make any changes. In step two, we're going to set up HA, and then finally, step three, we're going to do some post-configuration checks to make sure everything is working okay. The purpose of this video is to keep it short but sweet. So, I'm not going to go into vast amount of details. The idea is to just give you enough information to hopefully explain some key concepts. And then step two will be a follow-on from this. Hopefully, if you enjoy this first video, you'll come back and take a look at part two as well. Okay, so let's get going. Now, going to this, the demonstration environment, first of all, that this is not a detailed description of what the firewall is, or all the features of Firewall Device Manager. If you've already got some initial knowledge of that, excellent. If not, then hopefully you're still able to grasp the concepts. I wanted to point out on the Cisco website, there's this configuration guide. Notice it's for the Firewall Device Manager. There's an alternative guide for the centralized Firewall Management Center. And the reason I'm doing this is 7.4 is that's the version I'm using in my demo. There are alternative versions here. would reiterate that the demonstration I'm doing is for the virtual firewall threat defense for VMware. There are hardware firewalls. There are cloud firewalls. You can set up HA pairs for many different types, but once again, each one must be the same. So let's take a look at my configured firewall. It's not an HA pair yet. And a couple of things I wanted to point out. One is that if I go and see the interfaces, you can see that I've configured outside, inside, and DMZ. They're all pre-configured. If I go and take a look at objects, then you can see that I've got some objects for the DMZ and inside network. Those are ones which I've added. If I take a look at the zones, DMZ and inside are default configured by default on Firewall Device Manager. Inside and outside are configured by default. DMZ is the one which I've configured. One other thing I wanted to show you here is if I go to my access policy, I've created some simple rules. Now, if I go and take a look at one of the hosts shown in the network, and that's a host Attila. Attila should be able to ping one of the hosts in the DMZ, so that's working fine. And if I go to monitor events, then I can see these events. So these, if I leave that long enough, that's actually running. Okay, so this is all active. Now, if I go back and take a look at Attila once again, I'm going to stop that ping briefly. But if I inspect the ARP cache, when I try and ping that host, what's the MAC address for that interface? Here you can see it ends at E368F8 for interface 133.254. Okay, now if I go back to my manager, now if you've used this product before, you probably there's a CLI console. So I'll use this one. I do have some of these open on. I've got an SSH connection open as well. So if I go and take a look at the interface settings, so I can do that with this command. There we go. And what you can see from this is the pre-configured interfaces. You can see that interface G01 has got an address of 133.254. Well, if I want to see the MAC address for that, I can type in another command, which is this one here, so show interface GI01. And then if I look specifically at the MAC address, and then you can see that MAC address. So all I wanted to show you here is that the MAC address there, E368F8, matches that one here. Well, that's not really such a surprise, but why am I doing that? I'm doing it because it's a very important concept when you set up the HA pair. Okay, so really, the MAC address we're seeing there is the address of what will become the primary, and that's really an important concept. Okay, now just as a comparison, if I log into the device which is going to be the secondary, I need to log back into that. Okay, so this is unconfigured, and if I go and do a comparison here, show the interfaces, they're not configured. Outside and inside are configured by default. They don't have any IP addresses configured. No DMZ. If I go and take a look at the object management, those objects I created on the primary to be aren't configured. If I look at the zones, there's only the default zones. If I go to analyze events, not seeing any events there. Well, I wouldn't expect to. Okay, that's from a previous demo, but those are pretty old if you look at the timestamp. And if I go and take a look at the policy, there's no rules configured. So you can see the pre-state. So now if I go back to the top level menu, and you can notice in the right-hand corner, there's this high availability section that says it's not configured. So I'm going to configure that. I want this device, address 10, with all the config to be my primary. Okay, now once I select the primary, I have to have an unnamed interface for the failover link. Notice that the three pre-configured ones I can't use. That's for the outside, inside DMZ. So I'm going to use 03 as my failover link, and I'm going to enter primary address. Okay, so it's entirely up to you what addresses you give here. You have to assign an address for both the primary and the secondary. And if I assign a net mask of 30, then that's going to mean that's going to be a two-host network. Those are the only two addresses that can communicate in that particular subnet. Now, I could encrypt the communications. I'm not going to do that. Now, the failover link, if you've only got a small number of interfaces available, you might want to share the same interface. Okay, if you've got several if you've got a hardware appliances, one good possibility would be to first of all set up an Ether channel, and that would give you additional resilience. My demo environment is virtual, so Ether channel is not an option, but I do have spare interfaces. So in this case, I'm going to choose a separate interface, 04. But you reiterate, you can share the same interface. I'm going to put these on a different subnet. So this is going to be 1010.10.5, 1010.10.6, the same mask. And then I'm going to activate the HA. Oh, sorry, there's a typo there, 1010.10.5. So the red said that was incorrect. Now that looks okay. So if I activate, now this is the first part. I do have to go in to also configure the secondary as well. But I need to wait for the initial config. At the top, you can see there's copy to clipboard. So now what I'm able to do here is to copy this config. I'm going to do the Control-C as it says. And then I'm now going to log into the secondary device. And it's kind of the same sort of thing. I'm going to configure, but this time I select this as a secondary device. I could enter the details, but because I've copied them from the primary, I'm able to paste from the clipboard and select OK. Check the settings. I'm confident they look OK. And then I'm going to activate. Now this is going to take a little while to complete, so I'm waiting for a warning message to appear. So just wait for that to finish, and then we'll continue. Okay, so now we've got this successfully deployed message, which is a good sign. So I can go to I configured both devices, click on Got It. You'll notice on the secondary device, we've got this blue bar that appears. Go back to the primary. There's no blue bar. Get rid of that warning message. And then if we go back to the top of the screen, we can see here that the primary is active. There is some synchronization going on. That's something that takes a while. But while we're waiting for that to complete, let's go and take a look at the command line console once again and inspect some of these commands. Okay, so I can type in this command, show running config failover. And that shows me, or should show me in a moment, that failover is being configured. There it is. And it showed me that this device is the primary. If I view the failover state with this command, okay, then this is showing me the primary is active. And we're currently synchronizing information with the secondary. Okay, and if I go and recall that interface command from earlier, which was this one here, notice that we can see these some additional interfaces. Interface 03 has got an address of 10.10.1, interface 4, 10.10.5. If I just really slightly modify a command I typed in earlier, which is this one here, so let's go and take a look at interface 3. And instead of the MAC, let's look at the int. Okay, so what it's shown me is that is the failover interface. And then if I take a look at interface 4, then we can see that that's a stateful failover link for state information. Okay, if I go to, let's minimize this again. We'll go back to monitoring, analyze events. I can see these events. Let's just check that that ping is running. that's running. So go back here so I can see these events appear. Should get to see some new ones appearing shortly. So that's all good. Okay, now if I go and take a look at the secondary, if you get that server busy message, sometimes if you just get rid of that server busy, go back to the login, it's still shown that, unfortunately. Okay, so it looks like everything is now synchronized. I just refreshed the browser and it's logged me back into this screen. And so let's take a look at some of the things. The blue bar tells me that this is standby mode. The top right-hand corner, I can see it's a secondary device. It's in standby. And if I click on HA, I can see the information about the two peers that make up that HA pair. I go back to the top level menu. I can see information about the interfaces that which I can see here. I think that's taken a while to refresh. And in addition, if I go to objects and networks, I can see that the network objects here and the security zones, DMZ has been added. If I go to policies and access control, you can see those rules which weren't there before. So I'll just go back here and take a look at the interfaces, wait for that to load, and it should show those interfaces appear as well. Now, if I go and take a look at the CLI on the standby device, so this secondary device, there you can see the interfaces. So let's examine what's going on here. So I can type in show running config failover, just like I did on the primary. I can see that failover is configured, but this is the standby device as opposed to the primary. And if I view the failover state, then I can see that this secondary device is in standby status. Okay, but interestingly, if I type in show interface IP brief, notice that the only interfaces I can see are the secondary addresses for the failover link, which is G3, and for the state link, which is 4. I can't, and the reason for that is that what we're looking at here is standby addresses. If I go and take a look at the equivalent command, which we did earlier on the primary, you can see it now. I'll just recall that command again, show interface IP brief. Then here we can see the active addresses. So there's a difference here. What we're seeing here is the active addresses, and what we're seeing on the standby is the standby addresses, which aren't configured yet. So that's really all that I had planned to demonstrate here in part 1. So what we've seen is what some of the prerequisites for adding the HA pair. You have to decide which is going to be your primary, which is your secondary. Then you establish the HA pair. We've seen that process, and then we've looked at some of the consequences of what happens after that. Okay. In step 2, we're going to examine this in a bit more detail and do some additional configuration. Thank you for watching.